All right, all right, all right. Sorry about that. For some reason I set this up like 10 minutes ago, and then what happened is that my camera and mic decided to bug out a little bit. So, having said that, what I want to talk about today. So, first, I want to thank you for coming. And if you have any questions during the session, you can always type in the chat and just say something. But what I want to do and what I want to talk about today is a little bit about just that after in the instructional design process, basically when you're going to form objectives and, writing that task analysis, objectives, starting to think about your content and actually writing out your assessment items. So that's kind of the topic that I want to talk about. And as people have questions, as they come in, as they want to say something, that's completely fine. I'll kind of stop and answer any questions that people might have. So that's kind of how today is going to run. So, feel free to ask anything as I kind of go through what I'm going to talk about today. I'll be on for about 30 minutes or so. So, feel free, more than welcome to jump in. All right, so let's see. So let's start out with, basically during the instructional design process, you've done this analysis where you've come up with you've done some front-end analysis where you've come up with there's a problem presented to you. And the point of your analysis is that you are going to try to solve that problem. And if you're an instructional designer, you're solving that method through some type of training, right? So at the end of our instructional analysis, we develop this goal analysis. We say, this is our goal for our project. In that goal analysis, we come up with a solution. So we have a solution to what we're actually going to, solve. We're going to solve our problem, right? So once we do that, and we have this solution to our problem, we're able to actually start doing instructional design. So how do we do that? So after we come up with our solution and our goals, one of the first steps is to do our task analysis and write our learning objectives. So task analysis and learning objectives, that's where we basically take all the content. So I'm going to work with like my subject matter experts extensively here. If I'm not the subject matter expert, I'm going to work with my subject matter experts, and we're going to get all the content that the learners possibly need. And basically what I'm going to do, what the point of my task analysis is to organize that content. Task analysis is something that I see a lot of new instructional designers struggle with. And the problem that I see is that it's not that they struggle with the actual content itself and organizing the content. They struggle with the organization of the task analysis. For some reason, we've made this task analysis too difficult. Maybe the word is intimidating. Maybe the step is intimidating for a new designer. But it's really a very simple thing. We're just breaking the content down. Breaking it down as far. So we have in a task analysis, we'd have like our goal. And then we'd have step 1, step 2, step 3. And within step 1, there might be like 4 steps to do step 1, step 2, step 3. So an example of the task analysis, like one of our steps might be, if I was teaching someone how to brush their teeth, like one of the steps might be put toothpaste on the toothbrush. And another step might be brushing. And another step might be gargling or selecting a proper toothbrush. Like there might be all these things I want to teach people. And then within each of those steps, there are steps. So like put toothpaste on brush. But within that step, there is open the toothpaste cap and take the seal if it's take the seal off the toothpaste if it's new toothpaste, and put toothpaste on the toothbrush. So within the step of put toothpaste on the brush, there are multiple steps within that. The point of the task analysis is to break that down as far as you need to go. Like I might just assume that I can say put toothpaste on the toothbrush and users will be able to do that. Or I might have to say, oh, take the cap off the toothpaste. It depends on the level of the user. So you don't know how far you need to break it down, but the task analysis breaks that down. And why do we do that? We do that so that our content's actually going to be organized, so that when I'm going to teach it to someone, I'm actually going to be able to, it's going to be in some meaningful order. Like I'm not going to present putting toothpaste on a toothbrush after I teach someone how to brush their teeth. like after I showed them the brushing stage, right? Because that's out of order, right? You put toothpaste on first, then you brush your teeth. So the task analysis helps us see that order, you know, the procedure and how things are ordered. Hey, welcome everyone. If you guys have questions while I'm talking, because I'm going to be going through some information today, please feel free to ask me any questions. Just type in the chat. You can see I'm going to. So I do have a question here, and someone asked, and this is right along with what I'm talking about, do you need to see the steps, the task analysis before the objectives? Ideally, yes, you do, because the task analysis is all your content. You know, you can't write content before you can't write objectives before you know what your content is. Now, let's say I am the subject matter expert. I know the content really well. I can probably start writing some of those objectives, but ideally in the design process, no, you need to do the task analysis first. I mean, I really do these at the same time, so I shouldn't even give them an order. It's a same time thing. When I'm doing a design, my task analysis and objectives are done at the same time, usually in the same document, because I'm trying to do this as quickly as possible. So, but in a perfect world, yes, task analysis is done first because I need to be able to show that I have all the content here. Then I can like all the order, and I have the order correct, and it's all in like this meaningful manner. Then I can start writing my objectives based on the task analysis. So like, you know, for example, I use the toothbrush example, but like if I didn't do a task analysis and I just am teaching someone to brush their teeth and I'm starting to write these objectives, what if I, you know, start writing objectives and I realize as my users go through and I develop this training on it, and my users go through and take their test, and at the end I realize, oh shoot, I didn't tell these users to, you know, when I tell them to put toothpaste on the toothbrush, I didn't tell them to take the seal off the toothpaste if it's new, and half of my users couldn't brush their teeth because they couldn't get the toothpaste out of the container. I know that's a very mundane, simple task, and everyone will be able to do it, but I'm just using that as a very clear example that you want to make sure you don't skip a step, which is the point of the task analysis. That task analysis is a quality check. So it's like hey, do I have everything actually here? Do I have all my content like actually here? So that's kind of why you do it. The task analysis isn't longer though than the objectives. I mean, it can be, because you might have more tasks and say, you know what, I don't need to teach a bunch of these. Like the learners know these, so yeah, it might be much shorter. Like they don't need to know all these things. Like the toothpaste example, oh, I don't need to teach them how to take the cap off the toothpaste. That was in my task analysis. My learners, they know how to do that. I don't need an objective in my content to teach them how to do that. Hopefully that makes sense and answers your question. But that's the relationship of the task analysis and objectives. And ideally, I'm doing those at the exact same time. When I teach them, I have it broken up into an order. And I do that because it's much easier for new people to, you know, I can't just say do all this at the same time. It's much easier for them to see like a step-by-step process. And as they become a better instructional designer, you're able to see, oh yeah, you know what, I can do all these at the same time. I think that's a misconception people have in the field, is they're taught this step-by-step order and they think like that's how instructional design is supposed to be. And then they get out and really do it and they say, wait a second, I can combine some of these things. And then they all of a sudden think that like they've come up with this new process because, hey, I can do it at the same time. I wasn't taught that way. And it's really doesn't work like that. Well, I'm teaching it step by step so that you can actually learn to do each of the steps, and then you learn where they can fit together. But hopefully that makes sense. And the task analysis does not need to be difficult. It's really just a listing of all the content in some kind of order. You know, and I've seen people do task analysis that were nice, like graphs, like nice, like a nice like chart. I've seen people just do them like a list, like ordering it like 1.0, 1.1, 1.1.1, you know, just a nice like list that shows the order. I've seen people do both. There's really no right way to do it. The right way to do it is the one that works for your project. But it's really like a nice quality document to ensure that you have all the content there. You know, if you're doing like a really small training or like job aid, you know, you probably it's going to be really easy to do like a really small task analysis really quick. But when you're talking about like a training that's going to be like 10 hours long, you know, you're breaking this up into multiple units, it's going to be like a 6-month long training or something, you're going to have a pretty extensive task analysis, and that's where it becomes a very important document. So that's the relationship between those two things. And then once we have all our tasks, we can say, okay, well, I'm going to teach this. I'm going to teach these. These are the tasks I'm going to I want this instruction to have. These are all the things my learners need to do. And then I look at the type of content. So this is where I start to get into my learning taxonomy. And all a taxonomy is what kind of content is this? Like, you know, and I like to say, I really only like to look at it as high and low level. In my classes, I break it up a little further into Gagne and Merrill's, where they talk about facts, concepts, rules, procedures, and problem solving. Some people prefer Bloom's taxonomy, which breaks it up into multiple levels. I think Bloom's is like the most popular and what everyone talks about in corporate, but I've never seen it really in practice. I've never seen anyone break up their objectives or task analysis like that. I usually just see them on a page and they just have them in their procedural order. But you need to break it up in the high and low level. Like I need to teach all the like if I want someone to problem solve. So the easiest way to think of that learning taxonomy is if I want someone to be able to problem solve, like let me take this Rubik's Cube I have here as an example. You know, if I'm teaching someone how to do the Rubik's Cube, you know, I can say, here's the Rubik's Cube, figure it out. But is that the best way to teach someone? Is that the best way to teach a group of 50 people? Just say, here you go. You know, that might work for a select few of those people. They might be able to immediately say, oh yeah, and I see a pattern, and I know I turn this, and I know the point. But the majority of those 50 people aren't going to learn like that. I need to say, here's what a Rubik's Cube is. You turn, like I got to teach them all that entry level stuff before they can start problem solving and figuring out they're supposed to find a pattern and match up all the sides. So the first step is you take the Rubik's Cube, and here's the point. The point is to have all the colors of the sides, and you turn the Rubik's Cube, and it can turn these different ways. Here are all the different ways it can turn. And the point is that you're going to start to see different patterns, and you build up. It's that build up of knowledge. So a learning taxonomy says you take the low level stuff and teach them that first, like the what is this, how do you use it, so that you can give it to them and they can actually start to do it. You can't just, a lot of people can't just start doing something like building a car engine. I couldn't just give you a car engine and say, like some people say, I learned by doing. And it's like, well, everyone learns by doing. I can't just give someone a car engine and say, build this. Like, I don't know if any of the people watching are experts in car engine building, but if I just gave like a person, 50 people off the street, like a car engine and like in just in pieces and said, build this, do you think any of them are going to get it remotely right? No, not at all. Not at all. But if I teach them, this is what a spark plug is. This is what a carburetor is. This is how these two pieces go together. And when you take all the pieces put together and then you start building in this different components, and I teach them, I build up to that, I build up to this final stage, which is giving them all the pieces and letting them really put it together. So all learning taxonomy is just getting people to teaching them that you look at that low level stuff first, and that's what you have to teach before you can get to the high level. And the task analysis helps build that because it shows like the order of things, how they should be presented. And like before I teach someone to build a car engine, I need to teach them what a spark plug is. And that's seen in your task analysis. Yeah. So that's where that so once right before, like around when I'm writing my objectives, I start to think like what is high and what is low level. And then when I write my objectives, I make sure what I call instructional congruency or congruent. I make sure that they're in alignment with what I'm actually trying to do. So like if I'm teaching someone what is a spark plug, You know, I want to make sure that my objective is, given a spark plug, the learner will be able to identify what it is or tell me what it is, kind of thing. So another question here about, I just said I like to teach Merrills and Gagnes. How do you combine them when they have different? So they don't. So Merrill and Gagne each divide their taxonomies into facts, concepts, rules, procedures, and problem-solving knowledge. They both define them the same. Now, what Merrill's does is Merrill's has an extension to that, where they talk about some extra stuff, but they still are dividing their objectives into their content into those 4 levels. And facts are simply, so if you were to divide your content into facts, concepts, rules, procedures, and in fact, you could use Bloom's taxonomy and divide your content up into that. Facts would be Bloom's first level. Concepts would be Bloom's second level. Rules, procedures would be Bloom's third level. And all the rest of Bloom's levels would be problem-solving knowledge. So you can really use any taxonomy and divide it up into that. So that's if you were to use Bloom's and divide it up into those levels. Because there isn't other types of content when we're talking about cognitive content. We're not trying to, you know, we're talking about that cognitive domain here. So there really isn't other kinds of content that's going to fit outside the scope of that. I can keep defining it further. You know, I mean, I can divide problem-solving knowledge up into multiple levels the way Bloom's does, if I want to, but there's no point. And take like facts, concepts, rules, procedures, and problem solving, divide them up even further into just high and low level. What's high and low? So facts and concepts would be low level, and rules, procedures, and problem solving would be high level stuff. But you can take any taxonomy and divide it up like that. Hopefully that makes sense. But it's not, it doesn't need to be complicated. So this is what a lot of new people do, is they try to make this learning taxonomy, you know, dividing these up. They try to make it it does not need to be, it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be a very simple thing. Like a fact is simply recall. Like, what is a fact? The fact is identifying something, recalling something. A concept is starting to formulate those facts together, like being able to classify, you know, like use those facts for information, like to actually start to do some things with them. Then rules and procedures is where I'm starting to like follow different rules to actually come up with different solutions. And I'm going to eventually start to be problem solving, where I'm taking all that knowledge. So someone asked, I feel like my objectives have gone beyond my original training goal. Okay. So when your objectives have went beyond, and this is for a class assignment, which is why they went beyond your goal. So that really should never happen. You shouldn't have more objectives that are more than your goal. It probably means you need to reevaluate your goal. I mean, ideally, I would say, okay, there's an error there. Either like, so let's say this was like you were working on a project and your objectives feel like they're outside your goal. I would step back and say to my SME, are we really solving the problem at hand with these objectives? Because the objectives are outside the scope of that problem and the solution we came up with. And so there's some kind of issue there. So where is the issue? What is happening? And training doesn't need to be a step process. Like, it doesn't need to work like that. Like, your goals don't have to be, it's not always a procedure. Like, there's different types of content. Like, there's hierarchical, where like it's, you know, we teach like in this order, like there's low level knowledge, high level knowledge. Then there's procedural, which is like step by step. But the important part is that it's, as you mentioned in your comment here, that it's logically organized. That's what's important. That's our goal. to make sure that the content is presented in the correct order. It's going to differ by every single project you do, but yeah, I do understand what you're, that's why I tried to answer your question with what you would really do in that situation, but I understand why you had the issue. I understand why you had the issue, but the answer that I gave is what you would really do if you came upon that situation where you had more objectives, because all of a sudden you're seeing like scope creep, and we're seeing and scope creep just means that like your client's trying to get you to do something, or your project is going somewhere that's not in your original scope, like not in your original goals, not in your original solution. But I know if I saw that, I would start to think like, where is the problem? Where is the issue? If they were talking about more or less objectives and not fulfilling the goal. But as long as it's logically organized, that's exactly what you want. And you have to think like we tend to think like we're doing these projects and we're working, especially like as a student, you're doing these projects and you're thinking, well, this you want to make it more complicated than it needs to be, but like take a look at like a kindergarten class and think about like what a kindergarten teacher's learning objectives are for a student. Like my son River is in kindergarten right now, so like his teacher's objectives are very rudimentary for the most part. Now they're doing a lot of problem solving, but it's like on a very basic level. Like they're learning to read, but like their first learning objectives for the first part of the year was like to make sure all the kids knew like the alphabet, like what is A, what is B, how do you write A, how do you write B, how do you write C. So if you're getting stuck, so here's a question: I'm having trouble writing an objective and deciding on the type of verb to use. So think about this. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, so that when you're having trouble writing your objective and you're thinking about the verb to use, so you're overthinking it. The first thing I'm going to say is you're overthinking it. So look at your objective. So look at your task analysis and what you're trying to do right away, and say to yourself, is this high or low level? Are they trying to perform some kind of task here, or are they like identifying something? What are they trying to do? Is this high or low level? And as far as like your task, like think about how am I really going to teach this? So let's say you're teaching and for my current assignment in my class, where you guys are just writing, you're just going to be writing this content like an encyclopedia, because the content's not the important part of the course. So your user is just going to be reading this. They're not going to be like playing some kind of big simulation where they're learning about your content. So for your low level objectives, think like verbs. Like you're going to have your users. My user will be able to identify what a Rubik's Cube is. They'll be able to turn the Rubik's Cube. Okay, we're at a concept, rules and procedures. They will be able to, here are several patterns they will be able to follow. Problem solving. Users will be able to take those patterns and solve the Rubik's Cube. There are my 4 levels right there. But don't overthink it. You don't have to overthink it. The first time you do it, you're overthinking it, and it seems like it's a really difficult thing. But try to go back to a basic level and try to make it simple. I hope that's making sense. Let's see. I'm getting a bunch of comments here, so I want to make sure that. Okay, so someone said they assumed entry-level knowledge and they're worried about finding people. Well, okay, so that can happen. That's why your learner analysis is really important, which you didn't do for the project that you're talking about. We didn't do a learner analysis, and that's okay for this project. So you don't have to worry about like that, finding people to assess later. It'll be okay. But you have to, you were going to want to write that, like, here's the assumed knowledge that someone who's going through this tutorial has. So someone was asking if they have 3 goals, with each goal having 3 to 4 learning tasks. Is that right? That could be right. There is no right answer to that. A learning goal could have 1 objective, or it could have 100. There's no set number. So there is no right or wrong answer there. It depends on what is the goal, and then what are the tasks that need to be accomplished to create that. Now, obviously, a goal should be not specific, right? So you should have to have multiple objectives, but not necessarily. And it depends how simple your goal is and what you're really trying to get them to do. See, for example, goal would be general, like students will learn about 3 tiers of vocabulary, but then I would have separate learning. Yeah, that's exactly what you would want to do. So you take your non-specific general goal and you break it out into the right steps. That is your task analysis right there, and then you write your objectives. Yes. And it does get, you know, someone wrote, this feels hard, but it does get much easier, I promise you. It's just hard because it's the first time you're doing it. It's like anything else. It's like anything you try to do. I mean, when I try to, I'm a PC user. When I have to go use a Mac, I'm like in like another world all of a sudden. I like can't find how to save a document or open it up. Like it's hard at first. There's like this, like, you know, it's learning. It's not easy at first because you're learning the difficult stuff. It's like anything else. So it doesn't have to be difficult. It just is because it's the first time you're doing it. But once you learn how to do it, you're going to be like, oh, this stuff is really simple. It becomes second nature to you. So you have no problem doing it. So the first time you do it, it's tedious and it's a lot. So it definitely can be. All right. Well, good discussion, guys. Thank you. I'm glad the live chats are helpful in class for classes and students. And I invite like I sent this out on my Twitter, so anyone can come in and ask questions if they want to ask questions about stuff. What's my Hogwarts house? Oh, because I have my covering my keyboard is Harry Potter, Hogwarts pillow cover, and I mean, I would say Gryffindor. Maybe Slytherin a little bit. But we will, I'm going to try to have these at least once a week during our class. So we'll have another one next week, guys. And if you have questions, please just send me an email or whatever. But all right, guys, have a great day. Thank you for coming.